רבה, דוד. שלום לכולכם, ברשותכם אדבר באנגלית. So I asked myself the question when confronted with the title of this session. What was it that enabled us over the last 10, 15 years to achieve a frontline position, really, in technology in the world? It was nothing short of miraculous. As David mentioned, I was privileged to be involved in it, set up the first private equity fund, a venture capital fund, as it was called in those days, that brought institutional investors over here. $40 million fund, in those days seemed to be a lot of money. And I'm asking myself the same questions now, because I had the conviction then that although it seemed that it would be miraculous, that it was feasible. And I have the same conviction now that it can be achieved. But the question is, of course, how? And I have focused on three issues, really, and I will just cover them in a couple of minutes. 30% of the population of Israel, which is represented, I'll see if I can use the marker, oops, which is represented by the middle columns and the right-hand columns on your chart, is really working way below its capacity at the moment, and is marked by a very high level of poverty, which will surprise all of you, I think, just as it has surprised me. And these figures come from the Bank of Israel report, the excellent Bank of Israel report on Israel, which appeared just a week ago. Now, the Jewish ultra-Orthodox in Israel represent 8% of the population. The Arabs, I heard in a session this morning, represent 22% of the population. Would you believe that those living on the poverty line have gone up, say for the Jewish ultra-Orthodox, from 40% of their number living on the poverty line 10 years ago to nearly 60% living on the poverty line today? And would you believe that the picture with the Arabs is slightly better than that? It's gone up from about 35% living on the poverty line to nearly 60% again living on the poverty line today. And how many of these are in employment? This, to me, is the major challenge. This is the major way to get to world-class GDP per capita. You can see in the bottom line that if you look at the secular Jewish population, 66.7% of men, this is the left-hand column, are in employment, and 62% of women. If you move one up from that, only 24.6% of Haredi men are in employment, and 45% of women, which may be a conclusion that will surprise you. And if you move one up from that again, and you go to the second column, you'll see that the number of Arab women working is similar to the number as a percentage to the number of Haredi men. Only 23% of Arab women work, against 58% of Arabs. And on the right-hand side, we don't have time to go through it, you have the differences in wage rate. Israel cannot get to the front line in terms of GDP per capita if 30% of its population is extremely unproductive, which is the situation today. And I think, just as with high-tech, if Israel decides that it wants to tackle this issue, it will tackle it with miraculous speed. Now, in 1845, a Jewish Prime Minister of Britain, Benjamin Disraeli, wrote a novel about two nations. All of you read English. I won't read it. I'll let you read it as I speak. But it says basically that Britain was divided in those days between rich and poor, and that those populations had very little interaction with one another. In the case of Israel, there are three nations: the secular, the Jewish Orthodox, and the Arab. In the case of Britain, it's a problem that was tackled through legislation and in many other ways, and I think in the case of Israel, the same is going to have to be true. So those are two of the considerations that I would like to raise: the Haredi sector, the Arab sector. The third is the influence of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. As David said, I've been very involved over the last 5 years in using economics to achieve peace. Economics, security, and politics, in my view, have to go together or won't work out. You have over here, since 1994, a doubling of total GNP, or GDP, for Israel, from 80 billion to 160. Palestinians, as you can see, had stuck throughout those 14 years at 4 billion. If you look at it on a per capita real basis, since 1999 to 2006, over 7 years, GDP per capita among Palestinians fell by 40%. And my question to you is, what would happen, do you think, to Israeli GDP if the Palestinian line went from 4 billion to 12 billion, which in my humble estimation is achievable? The answer, of course, is it would go up too. So that is the third consideration. And with that, David, I'll be very happy to pass on to the next member of the panel.